Welcome back to IGN Live. San Diego Comic-Con 2019, with games like Heavy Rain, Beyond Two Souls, and Detroit Become Human, David Cage and his colleagues at Quantic Dream have been pushing the boundaries of interactive storytelling and the video game medium. What's he working on now? Well, here is David Cage to tell me himself and IGN's editor-in-chief of games, Tina Amini.
Thank you. Welcome, David.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure.
So you were at Game Lab recently.
Yeah.
And I heard you talking, and you mentioned being a creative in this industry sometimes it means taking risks to kind of maintain the flow of what you're working on with your narratives. And to me, that reads as innovation in storytelling. So to you, what is innovation in storytelling?
Oh, that's a big question. When we started working on interactive storytelling in 2005 on a game called Indigo Prophecy, people were a little bit confused about would it be possible to create a game that would be exclusively centered on interactive storytelling without any action, violent action element. And we worked very hard in order to convince people. And it's very interesting to see that 15 years later, I mean, the situation regarding storytelling has evolved a lot. And today, even in action games, most people think that an action game with a great story and great characters is of course, a better game. So the situation of interactive storytelling has evolved a lot. But I think it's being innovative is trying to go where people don't want you to go. And being brave, because it takes some bravery to do this. It's not always easy.
So what is a risk that you've taken that you feel has paid off?
Well, I think believing in storytelling so early on was definitely something I'm really proud of. It was not an easy bet, but I'm glad we did it.
You mentioned Indigo Prophecy, which is a game that I played. Back then, the video game industry and the landscape was quite different, and game streaming was not a thing yet. Of course, that's become very popular today. That's one of the main ways that people interact with games. So how do you feel about game streaming, considering the specific types of games that you make? Does it bother you if people are watching instead of experiencing these stories themselves?
Well, I think things change also a lot regarding this. In the past, people were watching the game, story-driven game, sometimes on YouTube, and felt at the end of the video, okay, I don't need to buy the game because I get the story. With Detroit, we saw something completely different happening because the game is so based on branching narrative. There are so many paths in the story that when people watch the video, they wanted to buy the game, saying, oh, I want my own version. I would have done a different choice here or there, so I want to buy the game to have my own story. So I would say that Twitchers were maybe not enemies, but were not helping us at the beginning. But today it's very different, and they really helped. They contributed to make the game popular, for sure.
Interesting. Do you think streaming has changed the way that you approach developing games? Like, is that something that you keep in mind when you're making a game?
Not really. I mean, we still make games for people to play.
Sure.
Especially for us, it's very important. I don't like story-driven games where you watch cutscenes and the story is told through cutscenes. I like when the story is told through players' decisions and his interactions. He is the actor. It's through gameplay that he tells his story. That's the most important thing for me. But it's great to see that people also enjoy to watch the games we make because there are a strong sense of cinematography.
Sure.
And we saw a lot of people playing together as a couple, sometimes with the man or the woman holding the controller, but both enjoying the experience as if they were watching a TV show together.
Sure.
And except you can change what's going on, which you can't do in a regular TV show. And that's what I love the most about this medium. It's a story that we tell together. So that's absolutely unique to the interactive medium.
Well, that's interesting. So do you think in like today's world of game streaming that interactive or storytelling games that have lots of branching narratives, like the games you make, do they have an advantage over more linear games where people can just watch it through once and they've seen everything and they don't need to go experience anything for themselves?
Well, I think there are different types of experiences. Some people enjoy this type of game or other types of games. What I can say is that the feedback on Detroit's been absolutely amazing by the community since the game's been released. It's just fantastic just to talk to people and to hear what they've done, what was their story. And actually, when they tell you about their story, they tell you about themselves. So you discover the people because, I was confronted with this dilemma and I made this choice because it remembers this thing in my life. And that's just amazing. It's just fascinating to talk to fans.
I have to say, I was very obsessed with Detroit's flowchart.
I'm sorry about that.
In a good way. I like having full knowledge going into one of the levels, because I would immediately open up the flowchart and say, okay, clearly because there are all of these segments broken down, it gives me an indication of how much there might be to explore and how many branches might be available to me, so I might spend a little bit longer time on that level. How did the flowchart idea come about, and what, in retrospect, how do you feel that system worked?
Well, there are some interesting figures about Detroit. I mean, the first one is probably the completion rate. We have a completion rate of about 77% for the game, which is incredibly high in this industry where most players don't finish the game they started. But because of the narrative nature of Detroit, people wanted to see the end of the story. So that's a very important point. Regarding the flowcharts, we did a lot of work to create all these branches, and we felt that some players may just play the story and just feel that the game was linear. They just had the story that they were supposed to have, and missing all the crazy branches that we created and the different paths in the story. So we absolutely wanted to represent that visually, so people could see actually the path that they followed, but also all the branches that they missed. And actually, this is probably the strongest point about Detroit, is that we wanted not to do smoke and mirrors, we wanted real choices having real consequences. So there are entire sections of the game that you cannot see in one walkthrough. You need to play a certain path. And there are characters who may be alive or dead, and there are entire scenes that you may totally miss. There are sections of the story that you may see or miss depending on how you play. And this is what we enjoyed a lot. And the second figure that is interesting is that the replayability of this kind of game is usually very low. And on Detroit, it's almost, the average is almost twice walkthroughs per player in average, which is quite high.
Sure. Well, you and your team make really interesting games. There's so much to talk about. Unfortunately, we're out of time today. But David, thank you so much for coming by the IGN stage.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, there is tons more coming out of San Diego Comic-Con, and IGN Live is here to cover it all, literally every last thing. It is madness. Don't go anywhere.